Doug Kaye. Doug is a fine art photographer and teacher living in Marin County, California, just north of San Francisco. He's arrived at full-time photography after a long career as a technical technology executive, and before that, he served time in film and television. Welcome, Doug. Thanks for joining me today.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
Today, we're going to talk about teaching people how to see how light shapes things and the role as a photographer. I'm sure you have some thoughts on that and a few things we'd like to start off with.
That'd be great.
So you teach Photoshop, um, uh, pieces of Photoshop, correct?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I started with the local photo club running an advanced Photoshop special interest group, and from there took on a couple of private students as well, and the rest is history, as they say.
Okay. Um, so in your teachings is something that you talk about how to see the light. I mean, like you mentioned that the light is one of the biggest elements of photography, and I teach the same thing. So how can they start to, as a beginner, learn to see the light?
Well, actually, this began on one of the photo walks, or some of the photo walks that I did. I know you do some as well, and one of the things when you're out shooting with people and you want to give them some advice, especially fairly new photographers, is to show them a different way of looking at something. And one of the exercises I find very helpful is to find some object. Sometimes it's just something round. It could be a lamppost. It could be a concrete sphere or something like that, and try it and get them to literally walk around it and look at it from 360 degrees, because it's one thing to understand in your head about the angle of the light. It's another to see it and to show them how it brings out the depth and the shape of the object based on where they are. It's directly behind them, how flat it is. What does it look like if the lights are behind them? It doesn't work too well in the middle of the day, but as long as you're not in the middle of the day, it's a pretty eye-opening exercise for a lot of people.
It's funny you say that because you're talking my language here. In the ebook that I have available on my website for download, I actually have an exercise called Walk Around Your Subject, funny
Ah, very
enough.
good. Very good. I need that book.
Well, sign up and you'll get
Okay.
it. I'll send it to you for sure. Um, so what about this is also rather timely because I'm doing an article, I'm writing an article right now on sort of experiencing the whole scene. So what else goes on in the scene besides what you see?
They- That's another thing that I've learned is really helpful. Well, it's helpful to me as well as to my students. Uh, it's trying to understand. Well, here's a way to look at it. A lot of people, I think most people, come to serious photography from being a travel or a family or a snapshot shooter. And the challenge I think a lot of people have is how do what's the difference between a snapshot and a photograph? And part of that is understanding what it is that you're capturing and why. When you come across a scene, let's say you're traveling and you come across a famous building or monument, and you put the camera up to your eye and you take a picture, and you're recording what you see. You go home, you look at that picture and you say, oh yeah, that was so great. I remember being there and how it felt and how it smelled and the sounds. When somebody else looks at that picture, they don't have the smell, they don't have the sound, they don't have the feel or anything, and they certainly don't have anything outside the frame. So that's not, that's why when you go and you look at your Uncle Bill's slideshow, I'm going back a few decades, when my Uncle Bill was alive, and we'd sit there and watch hundreds of Kodachrome slides, and he'd be so excited about it. We'd say, when will this be over so we can have some cake? But that's what you've got to deal with. You have to understand that as a photographer, your job is to be an interpreter. Your job is to tell a story, because you don't have three dimensions. You don't have smell. You don't have sound, and you're not showing anything outside that rectangle. And that's the fundamental concept of getting across what a photograph is versus a snapshot.
So taking it that extra mile. So maybe one day they'll come up with scratch and sniff digital cameras or something, who knows, right?
You'll still have a lot of different senses that you have to conquer, but you know exactly what I mean.
Absolutely.
The idea of you're deciding what's in the frame, what's not in the frame, the angle, and again, just the depth. We all know you get back and you don't have a three-dimensional image; you have a two-dimensional image, at least in most cases. And so that's what your job is.
Well, that's actually really important too because I teach a travel class, so this is right along the lines of some of the things that I teach, and I talk about getting depth in your images. And you mentioned something about, what is in the frame and what is not in the frame, and I always talk about what's important about, what do you need all that stuff in your picture and simplifying. So they simplify down to the basics, but you're right. So what is left out, the viewer of the final image can't see. So you have to kind of really sum up what it is your message is in your image.
And it works both ways because you may well, the biggest problem most people have, even experienced photographers, is having things in the frame that are distracting. And how do you get rid of those? Well, one is you move, of course. The other is always Photoshop. But get, especially if things are at the edges of the frame, they're really going to attract attention. If you have a person who's your main subject and there's something right next to their eye or right next to their nose, depending on the toning, the light and the dark, something really is going to stand out. So getting things out of the frame is usually the hardest thing to do. And not getting enough isn't usually a problem for most photographers.
Right. So that leads us to another question then about lenses. So a lot of beginners sort of don't understand the dynamics of when to use a wide lens and when to use a long lens, other than, okay, I'm going to use a wide lens when I'm in a small room and I can fit more stuff in, and I'm going to use a long lens when, I'm on an African safari and the animal is far away. But there's a lot more reasons why you'd use one over the other. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do, and I've seen it change as my photography has improved too, and that is, I think there's a tendency to use long glass because you're afraid to get close. For a long time, the only lens I used was a 70 to 200. And I loved it because I could get back and compose that shot. But more and more, I'm using wider angle lenses. Um, for a lot of reasons. One, it allows me to get close, and it gives me more depth in the images. But would you agree? Do you find that students tend to use longer focal lengths instead of moving in on a subject?
It depends. I find that the real beginners that, just are starting out and they have a kit lens, they might have, an 18 to 200 kit lens or an 18 to 55. So they're limited to what they've purchased initially, and then they don't know what to buy. Their next big question is always, what lens do I buy?
Mm-hmm. And then there's the depth of field question, of course, which is, do you want to try and get everything in focus? I would say for me personally, um, I tend to go to one extreme or the other. Either I'm working with a shallow depth of field, or I want everything sharp. That's sort of the norm for me. I think if I were a better photographer, I'd probably work somewhere in between more often. But that's tends to be where I go. I'm also shooting a lot more wide open apertures. Either part of that is I'm using a smaller camera. Sometimes I'm using a Sony NEX6 or 7 instead of the big Nikons, and the lenses are just much sharper when they're wider open. But with a wide angle lens and a small sensor, you can shoot wide open and still keep things fairly sharp.
Right, right. I mean, I come from the portrait world, and it's basically f8 and be there kind of thing all the time. So I'm used to shooting in the middle. But I tend to agree with you. Now my style is such that I tend to shoot on either end of I shoot really wide, like I love my 17 and I love my 200, and I tend to do the same thing. I'm either shooting wide open, whatever lens I have on, and I'm really loving my little 50-1.8 and my 85-1.8,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm shooting somewhere, f11 if I'm doing a landscape or an HDR or something.
Yeah, I'm with you on my big cameras. That 85 f1.8 is just a gorgeous lens. It just feels right. It makes great portraits. It turns out to be much more flexible than I thought it would be.
Yeah, I'm definitely singing the praises of the 4/3 cameras, and it's something that I'm seriously looking into as well,
Mhm.
because for travel it just makes so much more sense if
Well,
I
now
can
I
downsize.
know you're coming up on a Cuba trip next year. Is that right?
Yeah, just finalizing the details, but I'm going to be announcing the date soon. It'll probably be around mid-January.
Yeah. Now you may not remember, but I contacted you last year when you were thinking about putting together a Cuba
I
trip.
do remember.
Yeah, and I ended up going without you.
I know, and I'm
Uh,
jealous.
so I was there this past January, and you will love it. And
Do you
I
have any
think
images
it's
you'd
going to
like
be.
to show us while we're chatting, just to bring some up and maybe
I
give some examples?
can do that. Talk for a minute. I'll find them.
I'll keep talking. I can keep talking forever.
Okay.
I think we're two peas in the pod. We're singing the same song here.
Yeah.
Something else that on the other side of part of lighting is in order to have the three dimensions. Something I talk about in my portrait class, because people automatically think, okay, I don't want to have a shadow on the person's face, and I teach them that you do want to have shadows because that's what adds your depth, right? So you can't have three dimensionality without highlight and shadow. Do you have any tips for beginners on that?
Well, it's like you said. It's how you turn the person, how you orient them relative to the light. I'm looking and talking at the same time, but I'm
Even
going to
even
find
in
these
terms of
things.
scenic photos, I mean, shadows apply anywhere. I just
Well, it's the old challenge of the time of day that you're there. When we were in Cuba, for example, we went out before sunrise and we tried to shoot after sunset, and it's just that the light is more interesting. You get the longer shadows, you get the angles, but not everything works that well. If you're in a narrow street and the sun's not coming down that street, you're not going to have any light. So a lot of things change quite a bit, if you're doing that. Okay, I got some pictures for you here. Let me
awesome.
find something here. Let me go to my screen sharing.
Now, if you want to show texture on something, I mean, you definitely need to have highlight and shadow, and texture does not appear in overcast days.
That's right. That's right. And you play with that to your advantage. Let me figure the best way to do this here. Hang on a second. Uh, I know. Here we go. I've got.
So now you mentioned, I'll just keep talking. You
Yeah.
mentioned photo walks. Now I know, I mean, I've been on a walk with Trey, and he does Trey Radcliffe, and he does a lot of photo walks. You were on recently, what I believe is a record-breaking photo walk, were you
I think
not?
we had. It depends who you ask, but I think we had something like 500 people. And it was crazy. I mean, this was in downtown San Francisco, and we started in one location and walked to another, and in between, it was just a mass of 500 people walking down the street in San Francisco, which is a bit of a scary sight. Anyway, we'll come back to that. But here's an example about the shadows that you were just
Ah,
talking about. Right, this is a shot. One of the things that's fun to do, um, especially in an urban environment, is to find a stage, to find a location where you can just sort of park yourself across the street or opposite a wall or something, and you wait for humanity to come by. And so here we were. You can tell it's late in the afternoon because of the angle. And, you know, I had this beautiful yellow wall with these blue details, and I waited for the woman in the red dress. That's all it was. And
I was gonna
sure
say
enough,
she's wearing the perfect colors. It couldn't be more perfect.
yeah, I had my camera up to my eye, but out of the other eye, I saw her coming. I said, "Oh, this is perfect." But the shot it's a great one because it's pre-focused, it's pre-composed, and you are just waiting for the moment to click the shutter. Her foot is almost on the ground there, and but this is an example of picking the angle of the light to bring out the detail. I
So
mean,
no,
look.
did you shoot continuous mode and take a few shots of her and then decide that that was the best positioning, or did you just nail it on the first one?
My exif data doesn't tell me. I think I probably just did a single shot. This one is fairly easy, right? And continuous. With my camera, I had a D600 for this, so continuous is probably 5 or 6 frames a second. That's not actually fast enough to get perfectly with the steps and all that, so you really have to time it. But hopefully you and the viewers can see, for example, the texture on the wall. Um, there's concrete or stucco here that's the texture shows up, and if this light was coming more over my shoulder, you would not see that texture. It
Right,
would just
right,
be a
because it's
flat.
coming from an oblique angle from the side and sort of
Right.
down from there. I mean, the shadow makes the image. So looking for shadows is just as important as looking for light. Would you
Mm.
say?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I work with students on too is, Go out and just look at the shadows. I would encourage someone to come out here and just look at the shadow of that lamp.
So another assignment that might be fun to do if you're on a photo walk or even just anywhere is to, like you said, go and look for the shadows and photograph just the shadows and not the subject. So in this case, get the shadow of the lamp without the actual lamp, or get a shadow of a bicycle without the bicycle. So something that is proportionate. So
All
I
right.
have a question for you, Doug.
Okay. Sorry, this is not going well.
That's fine. No, I noticed, I mean, in your background, you spent 30 years in the technology industry, which is completely opposite of sort of the, artsy end of photography. So how does one go from technology to something as artistic as photography?
Uh, it's not easy, I would say, because I'm a more technical person than a creative person. I studied my undergraduate degree is actually in lighting design for the stage. I went to graduate school in film and television, but I've always been more on the technical side of things. But what I've found is that photography is something that even a techie can actually learn. And uh, it's going to sound sort of corny, but one of the things I started to do was spending more time looking at fine art in general, looking at painting. I already had a background in light, so that wasn't too hard for me. The other thing that I did, which was extremely helpful, was I joined the local camera club almost 3 years ago, and started putting images into competition. And when you do that and you get a series of judges, every month we have a new competition. We have, outside judges who we bring in. And between their comments on my images and, of course, their comments on everyone else's images, I really rapidly developed an appreciation for what the creative side is really all about.
So what
Um,
what makes an image work, what's working, what's not working, kind of thing.
yeah, yeah. Now, the disadvantage is that you tend to start thinking about your images in terms of competition. And
Okay.
what competition is, there are some fairly consistent criteria, um, and there are a lot of rules that all the judges follow, um, and you can fall into a trap of doing images that will do well in competition, and that's a fairly limited range of images. But it's helped me a lot. So I think those are the two things primarily: joining the camera club and being very active there, as well as studying fine art.
That brings up an interesting point because I've had some of my students sort of have this, I don't want to say fear, but sort of an anxiety around sharing their images for the first time and putting them up in front of a class, or, heaven forbid, a competition. So do you have any suggestions on how to get over that initial fear? Did you have any of that anxiety?
Well, that's an easy one to solve, and that's simply get involved with one of the social networks, because you'll start sharing like crazy. I mean, for me, the one that's most interesting is Google Plus, just because when it started up almost exactly 2 years ago, is when I really started increasing the amount of time I was putting into my photography. But obviously, there's Flickr, there's Facebook, there's 500 pixels, there's all these different sites. But getting involved in one of the online communities, sharing your stuff, and the beauty of that is you're not just sharing your best work, you're sharing your second best work as well, and you'll get feedback, and you'll see what works and you'll see what doesn't. You'll get reactions, and you'll put something up and you'll say, oh, I thought that was going to be so appreciated, and no one comments on it. And then
Right.
you put up something you think is sort of mediocre and people go, wow, and you say, well, okay, what is it that's exciting people about that image that I didn't see myself?
I like that you said the word wow, because I've had requests from some of my readers on how do I make my pictures more of a wow factor. And like I said, I'm writing an article on that right now. Do you have any tips on moving from blah to wow?
Well, I also have some pet peeves on that one.
Okay.
Let me start with those and get them out of the way. I think, one of the things that I got involved with fairly early on was HDR. And I was interested in it for the technical reasons. I wanted to be able to capture scenes with a wide dynamic range from, shooting interiors when there's a bright exterior and a window as well, for example. And I think that, the HDR look is something that bothers me. I'm tired of it. It was fun at first. Same thing with sort of, let's call it the Instagram look.
Mm.
Where in Instagram, it's so common to take a fairly mundane image, apply a filter to it, and say, oh, this is really cool. And the fact is that these things do look cool for a while. The old test of would you hang that on your living room wall? I mean, they failed that pretty miserably. But I think the problem is, I think there's a tendency to want to take a not very good photograph and think you can turn it into a good photograph in post production.
Right.
I think when you do post production, spend your time not on your mediocre images, spend your time on your best images, because that's where the investment's worthwhile. Uh, I think I think if you have an image that doesn't excite you to begin with, you should move to another image. The film is really cheap now.
Yeah, yeah, no
And
doubt.
you should shoot a lot. I mean, I'll shoot thousands of images in a day sometimes, and gee, if I get one or two good images out of that, I'm pretty happy. And I'll invest a lot of time. Unlike some people, I do quite a bit of post production on my photography. I enjoy it. My strategy is that I go out and I have an idea of what I want to capture, and I do the best I can. I don't ever say, "Oh, I'm going to fix it in Photoshop." Or let's say I rarely do that. But when I get back, that to me is starting again from zero. I like to think of all the images on my cards as being the raw material for something else. And I may change it to monochrome, whereas perhaps I didn't think of it as a monochrome originally. I certainly may crop aggressively in one way or another. I've been known to turn images upside down because I like them better upside down. Um, but I don't know. I'm not sure I answered your question other than my pet peeve part. But I I do think that it's uh, that I, I really hesitate to make a mediocre image, to try and make a wow image out of a mediocre image.
Okay, so I guess that's a great answer. Maybe slightly off topic, but if somebody is taking photos that they show their friends and they're not getting any wows, they ask me, well, how do I make my pictures into a wow? So what would you say are sort of the key elements of making a great photograph versus, like you said, a snapshot?
Oh, well, the first thing is just to get different friends. That'll solve the problem. Uh,
Isn't that like the old thing about you don't have to outrun the bear, you just have to outrun your buddy?
that's it, exactly right.
So you just have to take better pictures than the guy next to you.
That's right. That's right.
Uh,
So I think there are a number of things. One is you always have the best success out of showing something in an unusual way. One of the things we do around here is take pictures of the Golden Gate Bridge. I live very close to it. And I mean, how many pictures have you seen of the Golden Gate Bridge? I don't care whether you're in Canada or Europe or wherever you might be, you've seen a lot of pictures of the Golden
Thousands,
Gate Bridge, right?
thousands.
And you're not going to get a wow out of that unless you show it in a different way. And the same is true for anything. One of the things that if you're out shooting, or if you're shooting in a studio, is shoot from high above, shoot from down below, shoot from a different angle. Shoot. Get into it in an unusual way, and that's often a very important aspect of getting to know your subject anyway. Is really work the subject and try the different angles. Um, the other that's very important is look for a story to tell. The best images have a story. It may not be one that you can express in words. It may be a compositional story. But I think that if, before you push the shutter button, you need to ask yourself, why am I pushing the shutter button? What is going to end up in this rectangle that I want to share with people, and why? And
Absolutely.
I think those two things, looking at it in a different way and making sure you have a story are probably the two best ways to get closer to wow.
That's great advice. You said something interesting there about, I mean, the camera angle. I had a student recently say to me that um, he was showing somebody all of his photos and they hadn't met in person, and then when they met in person at an event, he said, oh, I knew you were going to be tall because all of your photos, all your angles were taken from up here, and he said that was a wake-up call to do something different. So now he
That's
tends
great.
to he makes an effort to crawl around on the ground and things like that. Something else that you mentioned earlier about, okay, you might go out and photograph 2,000 pictures and in a day, and if you get two that you're happy with, you're pleased with that. A lot of people would say they want to increase their number of keepers versus trash, and they're disappointed in, okay, if I shot 2,000, I only got two. They seem disappointed with that. Do you have any comments on that? Because I mean, I know my thoughts, but I'd like to know what your thoughts are.
Well, it depends what you're doing. I mean, if you're shooting on an assignment, I mean, if you're shooting a wedding, for example, which I'm lucky to say I don't have to do, um,
You better get more
then
than two.
you better get more than two. You better have a lot of keepers, and you better have all the required shots for the wedding. Um, and I mean, certainly with 1,000 shots, I end up with more than one that I like. But part of that is just the fact that you can afford to be fussy. You can say, here are 10 that I like, but I'm only going to publish one of them. That's going to be the one that's going to make it into my portfolio or to the book I'm doing or whatever it is. Um, when I get back with 1,000 images, depending on what I'm shooting, I might go into Lightroom and reject, 100 that are out of focus. If they're people, I might reject, another 100 or 200 because the expressions on the people's faces are horrible. My wife finally taught me not to publish pictures of women that aren't flattering. If I catch a woman making a funny face, don't put that picture online. Right?
How many times did she have to slap you before you got that?
Yeah, I have the bruises to show for it.
I
And
bet.
but the it depends what you're trying to do. If you're, like I say, if you're on an assignment, you have to publish a certain number of images, and you probably have a certain number of points of view that are mandatory that you put out there. If you're a quote fine art photographer, which I love that description because it catches anything or anything. But if that's what you're doing, then you have the choice. You can come back from a day of shooting and say, I'm not really happy with anything.
We should coin a new term instead of, for people that are not pros, but why don't we just call them fun photographers instead of a, fine art or a label, just
Yeah,
for fun.
could be. I mean, somebody asked me once what kind of photography I do, and because of what I was working on at the time, I said, "Oh, I'm a documentary photographer," and they said, "Oh, that's a catch-all for everything, isn't it?" Which is quite true. Hey, I found another interesting picture that illustrates some of the stuff that we're talking about here.
Okay.
Did
I
that one
think
show up?
the other thing that to just wrap up on that sort of number of pictures to keepers, would you agree that if you get choosier in your selection process, you'll get closer to the wows as well?
I think so. And you remember, there's a feedback cycle here, which is you go out and you shoot, and you come back and you look and you publish, and that disappointment, well, sorry, I shouldn't say just a disappointment, the success and the failure is going to influence how you go out and shoot the next day. There are a lot of people who don't like to do any post-production. Some people just shoot and do nothing with their images. Some people shoot and publish without spending a lot of time looking at them.
Yep, very
But if
true.
you shoot, you look, you select, and you publish, next time you've learned something, because you've learned what worked for you and what didn't. I would say that, for me, if I'm out, let's say doing a photo walk, which is a pretty undirected way of shooting. Um, I see, I've got this picture up here. I should keep up there for you. If I'm up there shooting all the time, I'm probably not putting as much thought into the capture process as I should. And that's one of the reasons I'll come home with some relatively unsatisfactory images. I happen to be a person who likes to take the time to work on a subject even when I'm out on the street. So that's important.
So
Um,
tell me about that image that was on the screen, and
all right, I
we'll
got to get it back. Yeah.
start to
So
wrap it up here.
I'm
That's
teasing
Cuba
you.
again, I'm
Yeah,
assuming.
I'm teasing you with pictures of Havana.
I know.
So this is inside one of the markets. The Cuban government now allows for individuals to run private markets, and they're located in a few spots around the city. And this is the butcher. And now, one of the this again, here's a case of I know this story and you don't. It turns out this butcher in particular doesn't like to have his picture taken. And so I was able to get away with this. But people who know this guy say, how did you get that shot? So that's not fair because, again, that's not part of it. But there's a story here. And part of this is I thought it was important to keep the people on the right side in the image. There's a guy leaning into the frame. There's a guy with his back to us with his hands behind his head. There's, of course, the woman. And there's even a little person across the street there. And being able to see the interior as well as the exterior here, even though we've got the blue color temperature back there, this was part of telling this whole story of this butcher with this. I hope it comes across as a big laugh. Somebody looked at this one and said, oh, did he just toss something into the air? But this is a picture that, to me, captures a lot of the spirit of Havana, and hopefully that comes across.
No, definitely looks like he's got a big laugh, and there is some sort of joke between the two of you for sure.
Yeah. Let's see. Here's another one. I'm gonna click, and I might lose you for a second, but let's see what we can do here. Bring this one up. Go over here. Screen share, and here's one. All right. So
Oh yeah.
everybody knows there are thousands and thousands of old American cars in Havana, and there really are a lot. And they range from impeccably gorgeous to barely able to stand up. But there are also lots of pictures of these cars, and I wanted to capture it in a different way. So here's a picture of one of the cars reflected in a puddle on the street, and you can tell I've played with the saturation and so forth. In this case, the reflection is more vibrant than the live car. Um, just an experiment, something I wanted to do that was different, that showed these cars in a different way.
So you went out with the intention of capturing something of these cars that was different, and so you went looking for that, right?
I did. Well, it started spending hours shooting cars, just standing there watching them come around the corner, and realizing that first of all I had to make sure I got a decent background because there's a lot of modern things in Cuba that sort of violate this 1950s look. Um, and then realizing I was to some extent just getting snapshots of cars coming around the corner. So I said, I'm going to go out and do something different. And this is in front of the University of Havana that had just rained. There were some great puddles there. And I probably stood in this location, 20, 30 minutes, just trying to get the right car to come by at the right moment, without getting too wet, because I did get wet taking these pictures.
And I think that's something that, as beginners, we tend not to, want to stand there for 20 minutes, or the people don't have, maybe the people you're traveling with don't have patience to wait for you, right? So that's not always a luxury of doing. So you kind of have to make the best of both worlds, right?
And that's why, your tour to Havana will be so great. What we did was we were there with photographers only. It's a little harder for Americans to get there, but
Right.
this was something that was licensed by the Treasury Department here in the United States. And it was all photographers. And in fact, we pretty much stayed in Havana, pretty much in the same neighborhoods every day for a week. We went back to the same locations over and over again, got to know the streets, even photographed some of the same people day after day. Which was a marvelous experience because if I had been there with my wife on a vacation, I could never ever have done that.
Right.
You know,
So put yourself in a situation where you're able to have that type of experience.
that's right. And one of the things I also recommend is the photo walks. A lot of the photo walks I'm leading, so I really don't have the flexibility. And even when I'm just a participant, there's so much socializing and there's so much walking that you don't get to really do it. I have a good friend, Scott Loftusness, and he and I try and go out every Friday. We succeed about once a month. And we'll pick a location here in the Bay Area, and the two of us will just go shoot that location. We'll sort of stroll around, we'll stop to shoot. We might not talk for an hour. Uh, one of us might get ahead of the other, but we will really work a location and work a subject for a long time. And then, of course, you have the benefit of seeing what the other person saw and what the other person captured, and you'll always have that reaction of, oh wow, I never saw that, or it never occurred to me to shoot that way, and it's very, very helpful.
That's what I love about photo walks too. You can have 50 or 500 people walking down the street shooting, virtually the same subject matter and come up with 500 different shots. That's what I love.
That's right. It's great.
Yeah.
I'm going to show you one more quick one here if I
All
can.
right.
Just something totally different. So here's a shot. The San Francisco Museum of Modern Art is just in the process of closing for a 3-year renovation. And the light in this building is spectacular, as you can see. And this is just a shot that I took about a week ago. Um, she was not a model. She was just another museum patron who happened to be standing there. And I waited for her. I stood here and waited for someone to come and be somewhere in that area.
Okay,
But
I saw this on your Google Plus feed, and I was wondering about this. I saw the thing about the museum closing for a while, but what I like about this is that you've made it black and white, so it simplifies it right down to the geometric elements that are in this shot, and then the human person, adds the human element in there. It's a really successful image.
oh, thank you, thank you. That was the goal. First of all, what you're seeing here is almost black and white without it being desaturated. The museum lobby is done in black and white. Now, she had some colorful clothes on, but it's just interesting because it's a study just of light and shadow and texture. But the lobby itself is that it's a study of light, shadow, and texture. Um, and one of the things I did, I've released some free plugins that I've done for Photoshop. They're not plugins actually; they're actions. But I've been doing a lot of work with tonality and what do you call them? Tone masks and tone painting. And this is one that was done using some of the free actions that I give out on my blog that allow you to manipulate just the quarter tones, which are the areas that are sort of light gray, or just 3/4 tones, which are the dark gray areas of the image. And so this was tweaked using those actions.
Okay. Well, I will provide a link to that page on your blog so people can check that out if they're interested.
Mhm.
And I think something else about, light and shadow we're talking about here, and black and white really simplifies it down to the light element. You see the light, you see the shapes, and I find that a lot of times when we look at things in color, our eyes can get, confused. And most of the digital cameras now have an ability to shoot in black and white, and something that I recommend is, if you haven't tried it, put your camera on black and white. Even if you're shooting raw, you can still have the preview come up in black and white, and it just gives you a better idea of what the light is doing, and help you to see the light a little bit better.
All right, and here's an example of what we were talking about earlier. If you look at this image, if you look at the top of that column, it's lit pretty evenly, and if you only looked at the top of that, you wouldn't know it was a column. It looks flat.
Right. Yep.
If you look at the bottom of the column, the shading gives you the sense of depth and the sense that this might in fact be round.
Right.
So just in one shot there with one object, you get a sense of both things there.
The same thing with the railing. The top of the railing is bright, and then the front
Mhm.
side facing us is a darker gray, and then the inside is another darker gray, and it gives you that three-dimensional look of a cube, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. Well, let's sort of give a summation of what can beginners take away from here and go start to practice if they want to go out and shoot tomorrow and join a photo walk.
Well, I would say, first of all, with your photo walk, um, try and shoot with other people and share the same subject so that when you get back, you can compare them. Use social networking. Boy, if you have a local photo club, I really think you should join your local photo club. They're so helpful. Um, but go out, walk around your subjects, get a sense of how they look from 360 degrees in 3 dimensions, or as I say to some people, in 4 dimensions. Sometimes, if you have the right gear, shoot a long exposure of something. Use a tripod, of course. If you have water, try freezing it with a fast shutter speed. Try shooting it with a slow shutter speed. See which one you like, because every one of those gives you a different perspective on your subject.
It's all great advice. That's lovely. I'm also a part of Drink and Click. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm a chapter lead for the Edmonton branch here. And if people want to find events, I'll put a link to that as well. There's a lot of cities that have drink and click events, and basically what it is you just go and hang out with a bunch of photographers, amateurs and pros, all different levels, and you get to go and have a chance to go out photograph together, and then have a social event, whether it be a cup of coffee or a beer or whatever your preference.
Yeah, yeah, it's a lot of fun. Unfortunately, here in the Bay Area, our drink and click is on the same night typically as our photo club competition. So I rarely get to go to the drink and clicks unless I decide I'm going to skip out on the
You
competition.
got to pick one. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Doug. This has been awesome, and like I said, we're kind of two peas in the pod here, so you're reinforcing everything I'm always talking about. It's nice to hear somebody else with the same beliefs.
Oh, it is, Darlene. It's always nice to talk to you. I enjoyed being on TWIP with you. In fact, I'm doing one tonight, and boy, by the time you get this on the air, I'll probably be in Turkey. I'm heading there in a few hours. So
Yeah, be careful there. I'm hearing lots of things about what's going on, and just keep your eyes open. But
I'll I'll send pictures.
do indeed, yes. Put them on Google Plus and let the world know what's going on if there's business. So take care, and thanks again, Doug.
Okay, thanks.